It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Hillel Schwartz. We're here in Hanof, in Yerushalayim. And Hillel, you were on the Kastner train. So if you could tell us a little bit about your family, where you came from, and how you landed up on the Kastner train.
I prefer a dialogue instead of a monologue, but we'll start with a monologue. As you said, my name is Hillel, but when I was born, my father gave me a name Paul. My official name is Paul Schwartz, P-A-U-L. Why? When he went to, I was born in 1940, August 1940, and that time already, Germany invaded already Poland, and the Hungarians themselves were not, the Hungarian government was also a Nazi type of government, very anti-Jewish. As soon as they joined Germany, Germany did not attack Hungary till about March of '44, because basically they were allied. So my father, when he gave to register my name, he said, they told him Hillel is not a good name. Hillel is after one of my ancestors, Hillel Liechtenstein, Kolomai. He was a Rav in Kolomai. And he said, why not? He says, well, you know, you're Jewish, and Hillel gives it away right away. Otherwise, you might be able to hide it. So he said, what would be a good name? Peter, Paul, you know. So it chose Paul. I never liked the name, but that's what in the official papers I was known as. So this was in August of '44.
And where were you born?
We were born in Hungary near the Romanian border. This town is called Berce-Újfalu. I went back there about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and there was one Jew living there, left out of 10,000. That's what I think anyway, reason, I'll go in slower steps. Anyway, so in 1940, I can't say I remembered anything from what happened, but I did have imaginations, how things were, how they looked. Since over the years, when communism fell, gave a better chance, I went back to Hungary and went back to different places that I imagined how they were, and the imagination was an imagination. It seemed to have left a profound things in my brain, because everything that I imagined, actually that's the way it was. So how do we end up in the Kastner transport? My father was, before the war, he was an officer in the Hungarian army, and he was in the reserves. So first he was called in right away into the army. Matter of fact, he wasn't even around when I was born. I think he just came from my birth, and that was it. He was in the reserves, and then they put him in forced labor. And I saw maybe once or twice till about a year after the war. Then finally we were able to get together. His story was basically that he was put in forced labor, and from the forced labor he escaped, and he ended up in Yugoslavia through most of the war, and he was very sick. He was wounded, and it took about a year after the war for him to find us. And that's a story by itself. But let's get just to how it affected me. I lived together in town with my mother, older brother, 3 years older, grandparents. My grandfather, Mordechai Hoffman, was a dayan in town. The name of the Rav in town was Blum, of Blum. Now, how did I get in the Kastner transport? The Kastner transport was three types of people. One, strong Zionist backers of establishing a state, which were probably the most prominent, very wealthy people, and Rabbonim and their families. This way, Kastner, not to justify what he did, because basically he did what other people wanted to do, but he did it. So since I have different opinions about him, but I can't be on a negative basis because basically my family was saved. He was the shliach of Rabbanu Shalom. How did we get on the transport? How did we get on the transport? When the Germans came to town, they had a list of rabbis and people and individuals who going on the Kastner transport. One of the people that was on the transport was Rabbi Bloom, who was the rabbi of the town. He was a famous guy. He had a brother who was the right-hand man of Kastner, big Zionist. Then was Bloom also. Matter of fact, his son became ambassador to the UN from Israel. And he's still alive, and I met with him also. He was approximately 10 years older than me. So today he's going on 90. Maybe 10, 12 years. Anyway, so they came to the town, and they say, we have orders to take the rabbi with us, who's going to Palestine. Originally, we thought everybody's going straight to Palestine at that time. He was 70, and he says, I'm too old. I don't want to leave my kehillah. I don't want to leave my people and my family. Therefore, I refuse to go. The Germans said, we have orders to take the rabbi. Is there another rabbi in town? So my grandfather who was 72, who was older than the rabbi, he said, I'm a rabbi, and I'll go. So prove you're a rabbi. So he said he went to Hildesheim Rabbinisch Yeshiva, which was a famous yeshiva in Germany. He never went there, but at least that they can connect. So I mean, he's going to say he learned in Hungary in some yeshiva. That wouldn't impress him. Anyway, so they accepted. And he said, I have children that are single children. So he had 2 daughters who were not married. They let him take him along. He said, I'm also responsible for my daughter who's married, whose husband is not here, and her 2 children. He says, take him along. And I also had 2 cousins who were first cousins. Their mother passed away just before Pesach, and my grandparents were taking care of them. The father was away in forced labor, nobody knew where he was, and the mother died just before the Germans came in. So my grandfather, they're basically my age, my brother's age. One was 4, who, by the way, I learn with him every night. He lives here too. And the older brother who passed away, who was a little younger than my brother, who was 3 years old. Anyway, so he says, I have to take my family, I'm responsible. So he said, take him. And from what I understood subsequently, each family, each individual was basically ransomed for about $1,000. Can you imagine Rabbi Yosef Steif, the Debreciner Rav, the Satmar Rebbe, Jüngeres, yeah. Their value to the Germans was $1,000. And a little child of 4 years was worth the same value. Wow. So that itself gives you can see how the Germans look at the Jews, garbage. Anyway, but $1,000 was a substantial amount of money at that time, and the Germans basically, this was the retirement account, where they were losing the war already, so they knew that it's not going to last. Kastner, with his negotiating ability, was able to negotiate. Originally, I think I was told there were 500 people total that were going to save it, and it ended up being 1,670 some odd, approximately that number. Nobody died from all those that were on the Kastner transport. Let me get so. Anyway, so they took us first to Budapest. And Budapest, we got on a train, and it was supposed to be to Palestine, and we go through Germany, and it stops.
Can I just ask, do you recall anything at this age, going on a train or?
Yes.
You remember going on the train?
Yes, exactly, I remember. Exactly the way it was. That's why I've been checking the last 20 years with people who were older, and they verified everything that I imagined that's the way it was. Anyway, the people, we ended up in Bergen-Belsen because either the Germans didn't get the money or the negotiating or whatever. We ended up being there for 5 months, till December, Kislev, Chof Kislev. That's when we finally went to Switzerland, and from Switzerland, wherever. We stayed in Switzerland. Anyway, one of the many...
Hillel, can I just ask, in your recollections of the train itself, do you have any recollections of what was on the train, how it was?
The train wasn't, it was basically cattle cars, but we weren't stuffed in like they took people to Auschwitz. We were, since we had a value on us, and the Germans knew that, I mean, they're getting paid, so we were treated, I can't say better, but we were treated that we stayed alive. Out of all the people in Bergen-Belsen, one girl died. That's it. Everybody, out of tetanus, from what I hear. She's the only one who died, and from all the people. So we were kept alive. We were kept in a separate part of Bergen-Belsen, which was behind barbed wires to the rest of Bergen-Belsen, where the people were being killed left and right.
And you remember entering into Bergen-Belsen?
I remember being on behind barbed wire, and there was like no man's land, 100 feet, and on the other side was another barbed wire with actual Bergen-Belsen people who were there, not held for ransom, but we were held for ransom. Everything I'm telling you now has been verified, and Shalom Aleichem. How are you? Anyway, everything's been verified and double checked. I'm not saying anything from my imagination. I'm saying things that, since I'm 50, 60, 70, I've checked with people who were 10, 15, 20, 30 years older than me. So what I'm telling you is not a child's imagination. I'm telling you what is fact based on imaginations.
And you have personal memories of,
right.
of the train and the camp.
If somebody would come to me and say, I'm 4 years old and I'm 80 now, and I want to tell you my recollections when I was 4 years old, I'd say, yeah, fine, tell me a nice story. But that's why you have to have a background. What I'm saying is what I imagined that was verified by people like Willie Stern, or by Jungreis, Chengurov, I think it was known. His daughter passed away, Esther Jungreis. Jungreis, her maiden name was Jungreis too. She married a cousin. Anyway, so when we got to, well, I'm jumping from point to point. The actual time spent in Bergen-Belsen was basically not pleasant, but not so bad, because I don't remember anything bad happening as a 4 years old. But I do remember seeing 4 Rabbonim sitting on the floor and learning Torah Shabbat Peh. The Satmar Rebbe, Debretziner Rav, Rav Jungreis, and Rav Yosef Steif. I remember they were sitting in the corner, and they were learning all day, but without Sfarim.
Baal Peh.
Yeah, that's Torah, real Torah Baal Peh. Anyway, I kept a very close contact with Rav Yosef Steif, with Rav Jungreis. Oh, I must tell you, when we were taken to Budapest, my grandparents, who were in their 70s, they didn't go any further. They stayed in Budapest through the war. He did this to save his family. My grandparents, Oliver Shalom, had, before the war, 10 children and 27 grandchildren. Of the 27 grandchildren, 4 survived. My brother and I, and my 2 cousins. Plus, from his children, 5 survived. Actually, 1 died from tetanus in Budapest. So the Germans killed 4 of their families and all their children. No zecher from any one of them. Out of 24 that died, 23, there's no zecher, no more children, everybody, nothing left. But Rebbeinu Shalom had his reasons for picking us, and I'm still being grateful to him every day for being here.
Do you remember in Bergen-Belsen any hunger pains or
No,
lack of food?
no. I checked, they gave us enough food that we shouldn't be hungry. Nobody gained weight, and most people lost. To me, Budapest were very little memories. Main memories: how, where, and when. Where were we, and when did we leave? So that's very clear in my head.
And Hillel, can I ask, did your family, did they personally meet with Kastner?
No.
Or do you have any recollections of him?
Nothing. I had no recollection of him. I had no idea how or why. Subsequent to that, I read all the books that were written about it, and my statement will be based on what I read, not what I experienced. But I did experience the time we got. First, we get to Budapest. We were there for some time, a week, 2, 3. And from Budapest we got to Bergen-Belsen. I do remember that we were going to Palestine. That's where we were supposed to go. And ended up in Bergen-Belsen. It was, well, okay, I have to tell you this story because it's Siyata Dishmaya. About 10 years ago, my daughter lives in Monsey, and I was by her. I went to Square to daven, which is close, wasn't far away. And after davening, I get in my car, and an old man comes over to me. Maybe you can take me to the stop sign. I live there. So, Kimmerein, come in. It was all in Yiddish. I'll say it in English. Anyway, he came in the car. He asked me right away, "What's your name?" I say, "Schwartz, family name." "Where were you born?" "Hungary." "How, and you're still alive?" He says, "Yeah, I was on the Kastner transport." He says, "You're Hillel Schwartz?" Anyway, it turned out he was also on the transport, and he remembered me. I was told I was a cute kid. Anyway, so he did remember me. His name was Schmelzer. He's mainly known for his son, Lippe Schmelzer, his father.
Sure.
Anyway, and there was a very interesting story that happened with him. Of course, I went to him 4 times, discussed it. He had a very clear mind. He unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago. But he was about 13, 14 at that time, or 15, something that he remembers. And he was also quite articulate, very, very pleasant person. So one of the things I asked him, because I remember the Satmar Rebbe dancing with the Sefer Torah on Simchas Torah.
In Bergen-Belsen?
In Bergen-Belsen. This is one of the questions I asked Willie Stern also. And Willie told me, everybody was allowed to take 70 kilos of personal on the transport, 144 pounds. Anyway, it's more than 154, I think. Anyway, Willie said, most probably Satmar Rebbe will take a Sefer Torah, a small Sefer Torah. Okay, so he said, you know it? He says, no, but I assume that's what happened. So one of the questions I asked Mr. Schmelzer is, did he ever say, how was Yom Tov? Did he have a Sefer Torah? Did he dance in Simchas Torah? He says, yes. He did. He had a small Sefer Torah, but it wasn't his. It belonged to Glassman. Glassman was some individual who took his Sefer Torah, and that's the one he was using. Satmar Rebbe didn't have his own Sefer Torah. So I told this to Willie. I said, your imagination was off. He says, okay, I wasn't sure, but anyway, it belongs to Glassman. And I asked him one of the things, he was probably the most articulate and remembered everything as if it happened yesterday. This is by Schmelzer. And I asked him, explain, how was Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Yom Tov, how did we celebrate? Every day, davening. He says there were 16 barracks. 2 of the barracks were from Jews, out of the 16. Each barrack had approximately 110, 120 people on it. And the 2 barracks that were from the first night of Rosh Hashanah, Satmar Rebbe davened in the first barrack, which was called Aguda. Can you imagine Satmar Rebbe davening in? And the second night he davened in the other barrack, which was called Mizrachi. It wasn't Mizrahi or Aguda, but that's what they called Aguda Mizrahi among the frum Jews. The other ones were whoever. Anyway, I thought that's very interesting. You know, here we are in not a pleasant situation, but when the Jews are Jews, and Aguda and Satmar and Mizrahi is all the same. You're Jewish, so there's no differentiation between them. Anyway, I told him you should say this to the Satmar Hasidim. Sure enough, the 70th anniversary, I think it was, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, of the freeing, that's Chof Aleph Kislev, there's a big shindig every time. It's close to Lubavitch Yad Kislev, so they got theirs and the other people have theirs. Anyway, I told him you should tell this to Satmar Hasidim. The 70th anniversary of the freeing of the Jews, the Satmar Rebbe, when we got to Switzerland, he was the guest of honor in Monroe. There were 30, 40, 50,000 people there all listening. He got up there, said a word for word. He repeated that, and I saw it on YouTube, which was taken off a few days later. Nobody said anything. There was quiet. He said the first day we haben gedavnt in the Schule hat geheißen Agude. Der zweite Nacht wir haben gedavnt in andere, was heißt Mizruch, and no shock. Anyway, that was the end of it. It was taken off a few days later. What do you learn from that? When everybody's against you, that's when you're united. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long enough. But anyway, let that be what it is. At Satmar Rebbe, by the way, the hatred that he had towards Zionism was out of pure emunah, out of pure belief. He had a different derech. After people went through the Holocaust, even the ones who were not in the area, like people from the Sephardi areas, Morocco, or what have you, it was such a traumatic thing that you had to be very strong, especially Satmar Rebbe's anti-Zionism. Maybe it's not being articulated the best way today, but everybody's entitled to their opinion. Okay, now...
Did you ever go and meet the Satmar Rebbe?
Yes. Matter of fact, when we got married, I went to him. He gave me a big silver kos that we use as kos elio. My grandfather was the Satmar Rebbe's Chazabocha. He was older than the Satmar Rebbe, and he was his Chazabocha, so he was quite close with Satmar. Anyway, I have so many different areas I wanted to discuss or give over to you for hopefully posterity, but you have to be careful how it is said based upon today's thinking. Mm-hmm. In other words, you asked me, did I ever meet Kastner, or what's my opinion in a sense? I don't have one. I'm grateful that the Ribbono Shel Olam saved my immediate family. Anyway, the recollections I had of being in Bergen-Belsen are very minute. How and when, that I checked, but to go over the 5 months, by the way, I think they were, in August, I think there were like 500 people were let out. In December, the balance of the people. So there were like two groups that left. The 500, I've talked to some of the people, and their mind stopped in August. I can't say I don't remember the cold, the winter, the heat, the food, this and that. I always seem to have what was needed. They gave everybody, like I said, only one person died from tetanus, a young lady. Otherwise, everybody survived. So if you go into these type of circumstances with the deprivation and hygiene, and that itself is a nest out of close to 1,700 people, one person didn't make it. And she died of natural causes, not... So obviously we were held in better conditions and we were given food enough to survive. So that wasn't an issue that I remembered, that I put an emphasis on. Anyway, and when we did get to Switzerland, I remember that day very well and exactly how it happened. We got off the train and we thought, I thought that we were going to be shot just as we reached the Swiss border, because that's the way Germans, Nazis were doing things. But unfortunately, we were not. We got to Switzerland. It took my father about a year till he finally found us, and it was very hard for him to get papers to leave. We used to meet in the border of Switzerland and Germany, and he was on one side of the fence, and we were on the other, like 100 yards apart, and shouting. And I remember my father as being a tall person, and he's my size, so it took me a while to get used to the idea that that was my father. Anyway, about a year later, my father came, and we lived in Switzerland for 1951, 7 years, 6 some odd years.
And where in Switzerland?
Mainly in Zurich. But at the beginning, before my father came to us, we were in a home called Ascher in B, which is near Montreux. It was a fancy finishing school. People came from all over the world. And after the war, he took some immigrants in.
And Hillel, can I ask, did you get to meet, or did you hear, I'm sure, with Rebecca Sternberg?
Who?
Rebecca Sternberg?
No, I heard of her, but I know from what I read subsequent to that, I know she was very involved, but I never had a personal meeting with her. So we lived there. My mother went through some sickness, and we lived there for 5-6 months. Most of the children there were 14 to 18. I was 5. My brother was 8. So him they fit in, and the Shira, me, I was like a pet of the whole, the little kid had to be taken care of. Anyway, my father finally found us. We lived in Switzerland. He did very well financially, and the first thing he did was move to the United States as soon as he got somebody to sponsor us. Blyer, who you mentioned, is the one who sponsored us. That's Yosef Steif's daughter and son-in-law.
And what year did you go to America?
1951.
In those years while you were living in Switzerland, were you very from Hillel?
After my father came, we were from Hillel. My father came, we lived quite well there. My father was nominated after the war to be minister, what do they call it, finance minister of Hungary, because he was in the black market and knew how to make money. So he was nominated, and he said, one of 5 nominees, and he said, I have to talk to my wife, my children, before I can think of anything. So he got what they call a diplomatic passport. And then at that time you couldn't travel, just get on a plane. You had to have a visa and purpose and who, what, where. It wasn't easy for Jews to come to these places unless they had some backing. Anyway, so he got to Switzerland with a diplomatic passport and stayed there. He never went back. Anyway, and one of the things that even the way he was, well-to-do and all, every week he had to go to a police station to show that he's gainfully employed and is not a burden on the state, etc., etc. And it was very demeaning. Life in Switzerland was excellent. Beautiful house, beautiful car, vacation, skiing, this and that, but wasn't free. So he finally got sponsored to take us to America, and Baruch Hashem, we got there for 51, and I lived there till I moved here, which is 30 years ago. Anyway, so getting back to how I explained to you, when I explained to you, and most people that I've talked to, I ask them the same question you asked me, how you're feeling to Kastner. You know, from people say he was religious. We believe in Rabbeinu Shalom, and everything is done by for the good and the bad and indifferent. If he chose him as a shliach, I can't hate him, but to go, you know, wave a flag for him, I can't say that either. So that's basically been my attitude also.
I think that's a lot of people's attitudes in the From Kehillah.
Anybody who was saved, the ones I talked to, exact same attitude. We can't condemn him, we can't praise him, but we were saved through him.
But what's interesting, a lot of when they had the trial, a lot of the people that he did save in the From Kehillah didn't go as witnesses.
Because
it was controversial. It was
It's very controversial because then you had two sides. You know, you had Mapai and you had the Cherut, and they're fighting with each other. Mapai, he was one of their men, so they supported him. Cherut was the opposite side, so they attacked him. No opinion. You can't condemn him 100% because people were saved through him. All the other ones were individual. This basically Hungarian Jewry that was saved from there, I can say very interesting and successful people have come out from those on the transport, especially the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yonatan Shtayv. My oldest daughter ended up marrying the Debrecen Rav's great-grandson. He was another one, and
Willie Stern.
the Jungereis, Chengurov, his son just passed away, who was my chavrush in yeshiva.
Sure.
And my grandfather, when he stayed in Budapest, he asked of Jungereis to be apitropos over us, to see over us. So basically we had a very close relationship. I think he was Masad, no, but he was at our wedding.
Willie Stern. Willie Stern was not Masad, the 8th, no?
His brother, Willie's older, had a author, I forgot his first name. Older brother, he was aide in our wedding. Now, okay, I'm jumping from times from years back. What questions would you have?
When you came to America and you went to school, could you relate to the children? Did you tell them that you were basically a Holocaust survivor, that you were in Bergen-Belsen?
No.
Were people interested in hearing you talk?
I'll tell you, me personally, till we got to Switzerland, language at home was Yiddish. Spoke Yiddish. And of course, German I picked up also. Hungarian I didn't know. Finally got to Switzerland. Where do I go? In the French part of Switzerland, in Béziers, near Montreux. They speak French. I couldn't speak much there, so I was there twice for 6 months at a time. I spoke only French. And finally, my father came and the family was reunited. We lived in Zurich. In Zurich, they spoke German. So here I know, all I spoke was Yiddish and French. And I got to start to learn a new language, German. But German was quite easy because from Yiddish. Right. Anyway, finally I got to be 11 years old, 10 and a half, we moved to the United States. Now it was English. Fortunately in yeshiva, I went to Torah V'das, they spoke Yiddish. That's the way the classes were given. And it was a hard time adjusting. First I was known as an immigrant, a refugee. It was very hard to integrate yourself in each. Swiss are very proud of the Swiss heritage, and everybody resented anybody who wasn't born in Switzerland. If you're a Jew, they don't like you. But if you're a Jew who's an immigrant or a refugee, even worse off, they don't even talk to you. Anyway, finally I got to America, same thing in yeshiva. I was most of the time in dormitory. My mother, as soon as we got to America, she got very sick, cancer, and she survived 4 years until she passed away. And it was a very difficult time for me, not only because the language, but also because home life, there wasn't much of a home life. And whatever. Anyway, after my mother passed away, I went to yeshiva in Baltimore for 2 years, and then I came to Eretz Yisrael when I was 18.
Was it near Israel in Baltimore?
Yeah. And then I came to Eretz Yisrael at 18, and I went to Ponevezh for about 2.5 years. And the 2.5 years that I spent in Israel, all my family, outside of my parents, lived here. One lived in Switzerland, who got married in Switzerland. Anyway, she stayed there. But the rest of the family, all my cousins, they all lived in Israel. And I finally found this was my home. This is where I belong. So it took me about 35 years till we finally made the move and left everything and moved here and started living where we want to live.
But when you were in yeshiva, in Torah B'das, did you ever speak with your classmates about your experiences?
There wasn't, surprisingly, there was not so much interest right after the war. There was not that much, especially when you talked between boys. You want to know, when there's recess and when do we eat and when do we play ball, and not, tell me about your experiences.
Maybe people didn't want to know. Maybe people didn't want to know. They felt guilty.
Most people who went through it wouldn't even talk about it.
Do you think the people who survived in America, they felt guilty? They didn't help enough, maybe, the people? That's why they didn't
I can't tell you why. I don't think so. I mean, the Holocaust wasn't a subject you talked about. When I discussed it with my mother, my aunts, other people, nobody wanted to talk about it.
Because it was too shocking.
It wasn't pleasant.
Did you ask your mother questions?
Yeah, I asked. They said we don't talk about it.
And can I ask, because it must have been a very, very special reunion, when you first saw your father at the border, how was your feeling seeing?
My feeling was I couldn't accept him as my father because I hardly knew him, and he's not what I imagined.
But when he reunited in Switzerland?
It took about a year, until I really felt, like the story goes, after all this lockdown, you can't do this, you can't go out there, and you can't do this. This child asked the mother, "Tell me, Mommy, is it true that I was adopted?" He says, "I just put that in the paper and you're ready." So, times of today, people are much more open. Holocaust got to be a whole degree. You can get a degrees in Holocaust studies. It took many, many years for people to be able to put most of it behind them. But as far as I remembered, I had good friends, Blyers, Steif, Rivers and Steif's grandchildren, also same age. Still today I'm good friends with them. And you just didn't talk about it. It's not a subject of one-on-one with individual friends. Of course, you tell the story. Everybody in that age group had a story. Either you came from wherever you came.
Or they had family.
Right. Everybody, and some Yisraelim who had nobody. They were raised by the yeshiva. So all these things is you have to put in a proper time frame. And it's very hard with today's thinking and the thinking of 50 years ago, or 60 years ago, or 70 years ago. I think the last 20, 30, 40 years has been much more people talking. And many of the people who were older and survived have their secrets also.
And your family, did they, before your mother was nifted, but your parents, did they associate with other Hungarian or with other survivors?
Yes, with other survivors. They were very close. Their best friends, my mother's best friends is people who went through Bergen-Belsen or who went through Auschwitz and they survived.
It's amazing. And can I just ask, what message would you give to the next generation?
What advice?
Or what message from all your experience?
No matter we Jews, no matter who we are, how we are, from, not from, the mountain, from the chassid, the misnaged, no matter what, we're still brothers, we're still family. We have to care for them. If we're going to, if we're looking to hate somebody, let it be the Goyim or the Arabs.
Do you have any pictures from that time?
Excuse me?
Yeah, I remember you once showed me pictures in shul from that time. Do you have any?
About?
Of course.
The pictures you had, those old pictures, you once put them to shul, do you remember?
Well, I don't remember which pictures.
Are they okay to look at?
Yeah, no problem. I'll bring it up.
Pictures of what? Switzerland? Or?
No, you once brought to shul an amazing picture of you as a child, very young, just after you came out.
Oh yeah, those
So
are.
maybe we can show. So I just want to thank you. If you don't mind, but really thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And it's very inspiring. It's very.
There's much
special.
more to say, but you know, it's just hard to put it in context. You know, when you get up to speak to somebody, what's the message you want to give over, and you concentrate on that. This is so much. You know, it's very hard to say it in a few words. But the reality is, Rabban Shalom chose us for whatever reasons we had.
It was all min hashamayim.
Willie Stern, a lot of yeshivas owe him a lot of thank yous, you know. He was a big Batzadok al Chesed, no. And Satmar Rebbe, I don't have to tell you, Rabbi Ernst Schneifel, the Hungarian Kehillas, re-established everything in America.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're very
Can
welcome.
I ask you something? You were in the rush to get home? My parents are also.
At the beginning, I told you my grandparents, who Sean, Zechet Tzaddik Levorach, had 10 children. And 27 grandchildren. Of those, 5 children survived, and 2 were single, 3 were single, 4. And they all married and started families again. Out of the grandchildren of the 4 survivors, they came here, and everybody raised a family. I know how many children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren I have, and everyone to me is in the comma. And my cousins, and my aunts, and all is in the thousands already. 75 years.
So for our listeners out there, the Koma is it's our revenge.
In the thousands.
Baruch Hashem.
You have great-grandchildren, right?
Me, but there's me, my cousins.
Yeah, no, I'm saying.
I have the smallest family, and the number's 80.
Canaan.
And there's other ones, 10 children, 14. I have one cousin has 17 children, his brother is 16. There are 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. One is 17 and 16, and then 12 and 10. And from them alone, it's a great amount. And Baruch Hashem, so we're 70 years in Bavel, between Bayis Rish and Bayis Sheni. 70 years. In 70 years, what happened from that Churban and today is unbelievable.
It's nice. It's mamish nice.
Yeah. In 7 years. Okay, this pictures of my grandparents all shown. As you see, they had to wear the Star of David in Budapest. They stayed on in Budapest while we went down to Bergen-Belsen and then Switzerland eventually. My grandparents in 1948, right after establishment of the State of Israel, they moved to Eretz Yisrael. Till then they couldn't. They stayed in Hungary, and he had a long beard.
He had to shave it.
He had to shave it. Not completely, but pretty much. He was in his 70s at this point. I'm older now than he was in this picture. My father, Oliver Shalom, had 11 sisters, and he was the only boy. Out of the 11 sisters, 4 survived the war. They were all single. The rest, the families, all gone. This is a picture of me when I must have been about
Says
1 year old. Huh?
No.
in the back, is the back.
I can't make it out. There's me and my brother. I'm the smaller one. My brother's the older one. I think I must be 1 or 2 years old.
It's amazing that these pictures survive.
And this is a picture of me in Switzerland with my mother. This is with my brother. I didn't put the same thing at the same time. And this is when my father came in Switzerland. This must have been 1949, I would say. Hey, exactly, 1949. This is in Zurich. Anyway, I like this picture, Panovich with the flag, Israeli flag, Yaman's moved. You know, he left in the Savoy, you have to fly the flag every year.
Yeah.
This is me as a bacher, the guy with the shirt. And Panovich. And this picture I like to show people because when they talk about black hats and so on,
Sure.
nobody had black hats.
Where was that taken?
Panovich,
Panovich.
gray hats. Okay, and many more. If you'd like to read this and give it back to me.
Hillel, thank you so much.
This is a picture of my father's family in Bericu, Uifalu, which was the town I was born in. It's near the Romanian border, not too far from Debrecen. And I'm the baby in white. That was me and my mother holding me. And this is my brother, an older brother, and my grandfather holding him. My grandfather was called Mordechai Schwartz. Both of my grandparents, by the way, name were Mordechai. One name, Mordechai Schwartz and Mordechai Hoffman. Of my father's on top, my mother, my brother, and me. From this, all the married children and grandchildren were killed out. 4 survived. One of my mother's sisters became, after the war, she became number 3 in the Communist Party. I came from a very firm home, and that's what ended up. So this is a picture of their family, of my family. This is a picture of me and my brother and my mother in Hungary, still before the war. Same, this is me and my brother before the war, and this was also before the war. I mean, before, when I mean the war is in 1944, March.
Before you were deported.
In March, the Germans took over Hungary. Till then, the Jews were, adults were in forced labor, and children, they more or less left us alone as long as we gave them everything we owned. This is a picture of my grandparents under Nazi occupation when they were in Budapest, where they stayed through the war after they saved us.
Which grandparents?
This is my Hoffman, Mordechai Hoffman, my mother's parents. And here's a picture of me and my wife and my parents in Zurich. This is 1948 or 49. 49. Anyway, this is a picture of me on my bar mitzvah with, this is a great uncle, some kind of Rav, myself, the Wiener Rav of Urchum Lvovitz, and Rabbi Yonshon Steif. There's no picture of the two of them together, ever. They didn't have any shaykhs. On my bar mitzvah they were together. And Baruch Hashem. So, This is a picture I showed before, but this is the
Ponevezher of
Rav with my grandfather and my uncle and myself. This must have been in 1967 or so. Anyway, there's many more pictures. Unfortunately, they're all in black and white because we didn't have color. And Baruch Hashem, I'm very grateful that I was able to move here, raise my family here, my children, grandchildren, and give them a sense of appreciation that we should have to the Rebbeinu Shalom that we are here.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you so much, Hillel.
You're very welcome.